All right. Has anybody ever been at an historical event, an occasion? You were an eyewitness to something historical. Yeah? What?
I once Nelson Mandela was released prison. He came to the States and toured, and I was in the audience in
Atlanta. Okay, you got to see Nelson Mandela.
He's in the apartment of a former head of state in Yugoslavia when Slovenia was seceding that day, and his comments were pretty interesting. As it was occurring.
So a head of state,
He was former head of state.
Former head of state, as the country's kind of breaking apart there. Okay.
Most questions?
Have you ever been at an historical event, present, an eyewitness?
Oh yeah, I was there when Kira was born. Mason was born and Lady was born. Very good. Biggest impacts on our lives, yes.
And you might not have been present at an event yourself, but today we live in such an information age that anybody remember where you were at? 9/11? You were in the hospital. Anybody else kind of where something, you know?
Staring at the TV work.
Yeah.
I was in the middle of class.
You were in class.
Teaching.
Yeah.
Liv and I were on top of one of them 2 weeks before.
Oh, wow.
No. Well, we were in Texas at the time, so we were an hour behind you guys. But I remember watching the TV. You know, the plane has just hit, and they're showing it and then the second one comes in. You know that, but you know that's still kind of that image is burned on your mind as you see these things, right? How about space shuttle challenges? You know, yeah.
I was, that's when I lived in Connecticut, worked in the shipyard, and I was home for lunch. I lived close enough, walked home, and that's when we saw it.
Yeah.
I was in class again.
You were in class again.
I was in the opposite. I was a student.
Yeah. Mary. You watch a Punky Brewster, watch a TV show, and didn't realize it was a true story until later. I thought it was part of the TV show.
Yeah.
Reagan getting shot. It's kind of interesting because we were looking through the images, you know, coming up with these, and I said, I don't remember this. I remember a camera shot from the other side.
Yes.
And so I have this thing in my head of, you know, seeing it. Some of you guys don't remember this anymore, right? You know, you timed out a little while ago. So, JFK, that was you know, now this one's before me, but yeah,
I was in class.
I was in third grade.
I was 3 years old.
Wasn't born
moon landing.
Did it happen?
That's
That was in Arizona.
Woodstock. Yeah, I was trying to think. You know, all of these are like negative, you know, traumatic events. So I was looking for something maybe a little bit more.
Woodstock response.
Yeah.
More so than assassinations. But, yeah. Nobody remembers this one? That's this passage read for us. I'm going to read it again. It says, in the future, when your children ask you, what is the meaning of the stipulations, decrees, and laws the Lord our God has commanded you? Tell them, we were slaves of Pharaoh in Egypt, but the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. Before our eyes, the Lord sent signs and wonders, great and terrible, on Egypt and Pharaoh and his whole household. But he brought us out from there to bring us in and give us the land that he promised on oath to our ancestors. The Lord commanded us to obey all these decrees and to fear the Lord our God, so that we might always prosper and be kept alive, as is the case today. And if we are careful to obey all this law before the Lord our God, as he has commanded us, that will be our righteousness. It says, when your children ask, and they do, right? And that's, why do we, what's the meaning of this? What's, why? Isn't that always the, I remember being at church one time, and I was talking to my friend who was an engineering student, and this little kid came running in. He's about 4. He says, why is it cold outside and hot inside? And my friend, kind of being a smart aleck, he went into this description of, well, it's cold outside because of the angle of the sun and the Earth's rotation, and you can see. And then it's warm inside because we have these things called heaters. We have, the heaters on. Now, they run electrical current across it. He gives them this long, and the kid just stood there and listened to this the entire time. He says, okay. And then ran off and played. But I kind of like that because he listened to it really because it was more than just telling them why. There was a story, and then and when your kids ask, the answer's not because I said so. It's not even because God said so, right? It's we were slaves in Egypt. And God rescued us from the hands of Pharaoh. And he delivered us. And if we do these things that God tells us, it will go well for us. And that will be our righteousness. Deuteronomy is always concerned about the next generation. It's always about passing the faith on to those that are coming up. So that's what Moses is telling the people. Again, this is Moses' last sermon, last time for him to share with the people. They're going to separate. Moses is going to go up on the mountain and leave them. They're going to leave and go into the promised land. He wants them to remember what God has done for them, but also remember to pass this on to the children, to the next generation. So each generation is confronted with this story anew. It's like they bring the past to the present. It wasn't a long, long time ago, our forefathers were slaves in Egypt. No. We were slaves in Egypt. We're the ones that this story applies to. So they bring the past present, bring the people back to the past so that there's an intersection here and everybody's confronted anew with this decision, with this encounter with God. And they can all remember. These stories shape us. They influence who we are. We went through the things, and we could remember where we were when 9/11 happened. We can remember seeing it. We can remember what we were doing. I included the signing of the Declaration of Independence in there for a reason. None of us were really there, but do you remember that picture from school? Right? Why did they show it to us? Why do they teach us about it? That's so long ago, it doesn't matter anymore, right? Yeah. No. Those stories still shape who we are. They influence us. And that's what Moses is doing with this, or what God is doing. I want you to remember, when your children ask you, what is the meaning of this? Why do we do this? Why do we do things this way? Why do we keep these laws? Why do we pay attention to this? Or why do we do this and not do that? When they ask, and they will ask, when they ask, you tell them, we were slaves in Egypt. That story is our story. It didn't just happen to someone else. It didn't happen in some other time. That's us. We were there. We participated in that. And now we need to decide again what we're going to be like. Isn't that great, though, about this part of the story, is you kind of get the do-over. I like watching some of these shows where you get to start over. There used to be the show, I think it was Daily Edition. It was the newspaper that the guy that's a coach on Friday Night Lights was the guy. What's that? Early Edition. That's right. And he would get the paper, and he could read through the paper and figure out where things were supposed to go wrong, and then he'd show up and he'd fix it. Right? He'd try to change. He'd get the paper a day early, so he could go out and fix what was going to go wrong that day. And so you got to decide, which things are you going to pay attention to? What things are you going to do? He gets to do it over. I always like the quantum leap, right? Trying to put right what's wrong. They figure out, this is what happened the last time. And then, Sam jumped in and he gets to do it over again and fix things. We get confronted with these stories. And the people in them sometimes respond positively and do the right thing. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they go the wrong direction. And God has to discipline them. He has to punish them. He has to try to get them back on the right track. When we embrace these stories are our stories, and that they're ours again, we get confronted with this again of which direction are we going to go? Who are we going to be? What are we going to do? What are we going to be like? When they do it well, we've got a pattern there. We can say, yes, I want to have faith like Abraham and follow when things don't always seem to make sense. I want to be like David and repent when I mess up and look at that and embrace that. I want to be like Mary when God asks you to do something that's completely outrageous and say, I'm the Lord's servant. Whatever you want. But there are other times when people are doing things that they ought not to be doing. When the people are about to enter into Israel or into the land of the Canaan, the promised land, their land, and they say, well, Joshua and Caleb say, yes, this is it, let's go. The rest of them say, no, wait a minute. Those people are pretty big. The cities are fortified. I'm not so sure about this. We get to choose different. We get to be different. We get to reenact, relive that story as our story. But this time we can live maybe in faith instead of doubt. We can live in confidence instead of fear. We can live in love instead of hate. those stories become our stories, and they shape who we are. This all begins with the fear of the Lord. He says, verse 24, the Lord commanded us to obey all these decrees and to fear the Lord our God, so that we might always prosper and be kept alive, as is the case today. And this is a theme that comes up, and that's that fear, respect, love, obey, all tied up in that idea. The first commandment: love the Lord your God with all your heart. The 6:13, fear the Lord your God, serve Him only, take your oaths in His name. All of this tied into following God, being committed to God, and completely and totally His. All of these signs and wonders, everything that God did for His people, He did as a testimony to them, so that they could have confidence in Him. You don't just fear God, and you don't just trust God, you don't just obey God because you're afraid you're going to get whacked. But He's proven Himself in the past. He's faithful even when His people aren't. It doesn't always go well for them if they're not faithful. But God does something to help them. It's not always comfortable what He does to help. They might not look at it as help. Wouldn't we like that, though? Is just to kind of be rescued from our consequences, so that we don't have to suffer. And we like that sometimes for our kids. We hate to see our kids go through something painful, but sometimes that's necessary to learn. All of these things happen for them to learn. All of these things happen for us to learn, so that we can fear God and love God and trust God and be committed to God in all that we're doing. So the past becomes present for us. We're called upon to participate this in a new way. The children's questions, what is it? What is that? Or why? Or why do we? Or why do I have to? And God answers them with a story. I like that. And you don't always start off with all the rules. You give them kind of the reasons behind. And it's all signaling a change in masters. That they're changing from their own masters or these old gods, and now they're going to follow God. And they're going to be His people. And He says, if you'll do that, it'll go well with you. It'll go well. And so this story creates a memory for the people's present life and present conduct. It shapes how they interact with God and with each other and with the people around them. That story becomes their story. It becomes our story. And so that's what I want us to focus on this morning. We were there. We were there at Mount Horeb when Moses comes down with the Ten Commandments. He says, God says, this is what I want you to do. This is who I want you to be. We were there at Jericho when we marched around the city 7 times and the walls came down. And God gave the people into our hands. We were there at the crucifixion. When Jesus offered up Himself. When Jesus offered up loud cries to God. When we participate in the Lord's Supper this morning, it's not just a remembrance of something that happened a long time ago, way back there for other people. This story is our story. This story is who we are. it shapes